Hello everyone, it's Clayton here, back with a new tutorial. Today I'm going to be talking about how using reference material as a resource to study and learn from can in fact help elevate your artistic skills and take them to that next level. The first port of call is to track down a reference you want to work from. This ref can be anything. Photography with interesting lighting setups, comps and colors are going to be ideal, but to keep things fun, I like to jump onto Google and find a ref from a favorite TV series or movie, or maybe a favorite actor or actress. That way, it almost ends up being like a fan art of sorts. You want to avoid using other artwork as a ref. The main focus here is to try and emulate real life. Once I've found a reference image that I like, I drag it across to my second monitor, so that while I'm working in Photoshop, I've got the ref sitting right there in front of me to observe as I work. If you don't have a dual monitor display, you can always set up both documents to be displayed in Photoshop at the same time. The workflow I use when doing these studies is fairly straightforward, but like with anything, if you're new to digital painting or drawing, it'll take some time to get used to, so don't be too hard on yourself if it doesn't work out quite the way you intended it to the first time. First, I quickly draw up a rough sketch. It doesn't have to be a masterpiece either. This is just to get down the composition and main elements of the image as a base to work from. This is where you want to pay attention to the layout, compositions and primary elements within the image, ensuring that you're drawing it up as accurately as possible to the reference material. This usually takes me about 10 to 15 minutes to get it looking the way that I want it to. Of course, this can depend on the complexity of the reference as well. When I'm done with the preliminary sketch, I turn down the opacity of that layer and create a new one above it and begin to further refine the sketch with more intricate details, such as facial features, creases and folds in the clothing, and the hair. Again, this doesn't have to be 100% perfect, because this sketch will ultimately be painted over later anyway. It is important, however, in this phase to give the painting a solid foundation to work from, so rather than concerning yourself with the smaller features of the image, you want to take a look at it as a whole and try to capture the overall vision through correctly laying out the compositions and proportions according to your ref. Once the sketch has been finalized, make a new layer below and name it base colors. Then create a color palette based off of the reference and fill in those colors accordingly. Because we've set the base color layer underneath the sketch layer, you should still be able to clearly see the line work as you fill it in. After that, move on to the rendering out of the image, observing the lights, shadows and colors within the reference carefully to emulate it as closely as possible. Okay guys, so this is where the fun begins, where the most learning is going to be done. But doing it isn't going to be enough. You want to pinpoint your attention into the particular areas of learning that you want to get better at. More often than not, the area that you're struggling with the most. If composition is giving you a hard time, this is where you're going to want to focus. Or maybe it's cast shadows. If so, this is where you're going to be focusing your concentration. In my case, color was the massive obstacle that I needed to overcome in my work. I knew the theory, but then you could have given me every book and piece of pro advice out there on color theory, but I still wouldn't have truly understood. Why? Because I hadn't put it into practice enough. But here's the catch. The catch is, if you don't understand something, how do you put it into practice in order to gain an understanding of it? Well, you can't. I mean, you can, but you'll be stumbling around in the dark for a good long while before things start making sense. The better way is to gain experience and understanding from the examples and resources you already have available to you. Luckily, as artists, we have the entire world to teach us all that we need to know. So it was studying these references that helped me begin to understand at a core level how color worked. how it would change under different lighting conditions, how different hues could be seamlessly combined, and how interesting colour combinations could complement one another. A single night of study putting into practice the theory and advice I'd been given and applying it through working from a real-life reference would speed up my learning at a 100% faster rate than if I were to simply take in the theory without any hands-on experience. I've found one of the great things about being an artist is that the things I create seem to represent a personal, historical journey of the growth in my skills and ability. When I go to open up the shoeboxes I've filled with sketches over the years, this evolution is laid right out there in front of me. Art, I feel, is truly a representation of growth. That is, in some aspects, a manifestation of our creative thought. We look back on our lives and see the progress that we've made in certain areas, progress that we can be proud of, but none as vivid and honest as our own artwork, the one medium that can express our most complex visions into physical reality. That's why these studies are so valuable. They are the stepping stones taken in this journey to reach ever greater heights, and when you look back, you'll see them sitting there with all the other works you've created. The sum of all that ultimately got you to wherever you are now. Don't throw out the old work. Sure, it might be hard to look at sometimes after coming such a long way, but to neglect it would be to intentionally forget the journey you had to take. Remember where you came from, and you'll never take for granted the progress that you've made. Another problem we face is that art in and of itself is such a broad topic. This often creates a kind of confusion as we jump into the deep end with no idea where to begin. So what is the fastest route you can take to absorb such a vast amount of knowledge with full comprehension and understanding? Well, you want to small chunk that learning into something more manageable. That is to say, rather than learning all the key concepts such as perspective, anatomy, composition, and color theory all at once, focus in on one instead. Give that one area all of your attention and work at it until it becomes close to automatic for you. Until you don't even have to think about it anymore. Then you'll move on to the next element and do the same thing all over again. Eventually, if you consistently put that necessary time and effort into practicing these elements one by one, you'll get to a point where it suddenly becomes a big deal no longer. Over time, you've integrated all this first-hand experience into your brain so that the concepts that once held you back are able to be handled with confidence. You will reach a point where you don't have to think about the steps you once had to pay close attention to in order to get the desired result. You will gain unconscious competence. Think back to when you were a child. Maybe you can't even recall a time before you knew how to walk or talk. You'd start out with the first few steps, fumbling around as you tried to find your balance, and quickly tripping over yourself and landing right back where you started. You didn't let that stop you though, getting right back up again and again until walking became second nature to you. And it was through a process of trial and error. Rather than learning the right way to do things, you're learning what not to do. The child eventually learns to carefully put one step in front of the other, in just the right sequence of momentum and balance, precisely because of every failure to do this beforehand. The child knows now to avoid the actions that prevented them from getting to their goal. This tendency to make mistakes and learning from them is an underrated ally in our ability to learn new things. When we are blind to that which we do not properly understand yet, the mistakes we make in trying to gain that understanding help point us in the right direction. The really cool thing is that you can apply this back to your learning as an artist. The reason we are artists in the first place is because we have a good eye for things. We are visual thinkers, which means when we make a mistake in our own work, we are our own worst critics. We know the standards that we have for ourselves, and know very clearly what we want our work to look like in the end. Sometimes we can be too harsh on ourselves. If we draw a character and the anatomy is slightly off, or the composition and perspective just isn't looking correct, we spot these things out and it hits us hard. However, if it were not for these experiences where things don't go so perfectly to plan, they never would. The mechanism that develops the refinement of style, I believe, is very closely related to the many missteps we took to harness it. That's why it's important to go out there and make that mileage. Practice every day. You will fail, you will have good days, and you will have bad days. Some work you'll be insanely proud of, and others will take your ego back down to a surprisingly humble level. Understand, though, that to become a better artist, you will have to stumble a few times in order to achieve that level of mastery which lives up to your own expectations. It sounds strange to suggest setting out and making as many mistakes as possible in order to get better. But that seems to be, honestly, one of the most powerful ways that I've found in order to improve and evolve. This process takes time, but it makes you look at your work in a different way. It's not just your output of self-expression. It's a living thing, growing and adapting as it develops into its ultimate form. It makes you wonder how far you can take your talent, and even what your artwork will look like years from now. Because it'll be directly affected by you, your feelings, your influences, your beliefs, and the career path you decide to take in order to make a living from doing what you love. It's the motivation to practice consistently that breeds talent. Talent isn't something you're born with, it's a journey you set out upon, and how good you ultimately get depends on how far you're willing to let that journey take you. The further you go, though, the more it's going to pay off. But enjoy the journey. If you don't enjoy the journey, then there's not really any point in embarking upon such a venture. Passion is what you need to drive you forward. Passion breeds motivation. Motivation fuels your need to be the best that you can be when it comes to the art you produce. I'll always treasure the many nights I stayed up studying away, knowing that if I could fit just one more sketch in before I turned in for the night, I'd be just a tiny bit better when I woke up the next morning. Every sketch I did was better than the last, and any difficulties I faced were obstacles I confronted head-on with eagerness. The kind of funny thing is, eventually, you'll reach a point where you find yourself at a plateau. You'll look at your art, and there's this certain energy to it. It's slick, full of character, and gets across whatever crazy idea you had inside your mind near perfectly. Most importantly, you notice that finally you can see your own unique style, your artistic identity. And nothing is more rewarding or encouraging than to behold such a sight. For a while, you are perfectly content and can't believe that finally you've conquered all these challenges you'd been faced with upon embarking on your artistic endeavors. But now you see there is no challenge, and although it's great to bask in the glory of having reached this level of fulfillment, that drive kind of starts to slip away. You aren't making any progress, and so you begin to stagnate into a situation where the chase seems to have been better than the catch. It's not that you don't want to keep progressing either. You know you should be, but it's just hard to figure out what skills to work on next. What is the next level? You know what though, there always is a next level. So while you've hit a point where the progression of your art has reached a standstill, simply enjoy the act of creating. Instead of focusing on the technical side of drawing or painting, work on your creativity. Figure out how you can make your ideas your own, more unique, the visions you want to convey, unmistakably witnessed by yourself and others as your own. This will become your new drive to continue, sketching away in your sketchbook until you hit the next technical hurdle. The other plus about practicing consistently is that yes, it helps you improve your technical ability and capacity to create, but also your work ethic. Chances are, if you want to pursue a career as an artist, you're probably going to be a contract freelancer. And to be honest, freelancing is the dream. If you can get a constant stream of clients coming your way, and you really couldn't ask for a better lifestyle. Picking your own hours, deciding how much you want to be paid for the work you do, being able to work from anywhere in the world on projects you've chosen to be part of, and having the freedom to spend time with friends and family is the kind of lifestyle I think we all dream about. But it does require an insanely good work ethic, especially if you hope to stick to your deadlines and in turn create a good reputation that enables you to continue living that life of freedom. And it's harder than you think, because you need to be super hard on yourself and take on full responsibility in regards to your scheduling and time management. Practicing consistently is going to help condition you to do this. It requires some real discipline on oneself to develop a routine and keep up the scratch with their practice without letting it slide. For example, you might commit to study for say 3 or 4 hours a day, or more if you have the time. It can be a struggle with so many distractions such as internet, TV, friends. But if you can resist such forms of procrastination and stick to it, you'll find something profound begins to happen to your brain. You'll start to realize that although you feel that resistance, you naturally start to ignore the urges or thoughts trying to lead you astray, and find it easier and easier to focus on the task at hand. This is hard for sure, but do this over and over again, day in and day out, and you will see that just like with any other habit you cultivate, it'll slowly become more natural for you. So to wind this video up, folks, here I've demonstrated one of the many techniques you can use to start out with in order to gain the benefits I've talked about. It's not the only way, so gather some of your own references of whatever inspires you and experiment for yourself. Remember that although you might be a little disheartened at first, the next will always be better than the last. And let's face it, you got to start out from somewhere, and if you're only just beginning to set out on this journey, it's probably going to be at the bottom of the ladder. Give yourself time to climb up, but make sure you keep climbing, because every step you take is going to help you get to the top. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and there will be more to come soon, so be sure to subscribe, like and share. If you'd like me to cover a topic you're interested in or having trouble with, post your suggestions in the comments section below. Thanks for watching, guys, and until next time.